My name's Kevin Gray, and I'm a mastering engineer. A guy moved into our neighborhood when I was a kid that had a mastering facility. And so he said, would you like to come down and see the facility? And I said, sure. He took me down there, and I walked in the room and saw the gleaming Ampex tape machines and the Neumann lathe. And he threaded up a tape and put a lacquer on the lathe, started cutting, and I knew right then and there, that very instant, that that's what I wanted to do for a living. From like 84 to 92, I was doing almost all CDs, because that's really all there was during that period. And then in 92, I got kind of involved in the whole resurgence in vinyl. 1995 or 6, I think it was, the first major label, MCA, which is now Universal, jumped back into vinyl, and I spearheaded that project for them. They called it the Heavy Vinyl Series. And it was almost a decade before Warner Brothers jumped in 2005. And that's where it really kind of exponentially took off, I think, because Sony, about the same time, jumped back in. And once you got all the major labels back in, then it's a viable game again. I do almost no CD mastering anymore. It's just like gone away. But I do stuff for high res at the same time that I'm doing the vinyl. And so I either do SACDs or I do 2496 or 24192 captures of everything that I do. Not everything, but a lot of what I do for the labels that want that, for download. I would always argue for the original master tape if it's available, and if not, a good clean copy of the master tape, preferably like at 30 inches per second, half inch, if it was like a 15 IPS original quarter-inch master, and that happens a lot. I think one of the problems is that it's very, very hard to get original master tapes now. That's kind of the not as talked about factor of the project. And so it's really difficult. I actually think in some cases a high-res digital transfer of the master tape would sound better than making another analog transfer, even at 30 IPS half-inch. But, that's just my own personal feeling. Most of the people that I know that have learned how to cut vinyl have always sort of had a burning desire to do that. Not sort of like, oh, well, that sounds like it might be interesting. There's just too many facets to it and too many things to learn, I think, for that to stick with somebody who just thinks, it might be an interesting novelty to get involved in. I love vinyl. I listen to vinyl at home. I never stopped. And I think the guys that are mostly doing this now feel that way. But as far as learning, I think the first thing that somebody needs to understand about cutting vinyl is the physics of doing it. There are so many things in the science, in the physics, that you can't bend and break the laws. You have to understand what the limitations are. And once you understand the limitations, the rest becomes easy. I spent 5 years from the time I started cutting to the point where I really looked back and went, wow, it took me most of this time to really learn the physics of this. It's a lot of trial and error at the beginning, and certain things don't work, and you don't quite understand why until you understand the physics of it. I've had people come to me and say, well, what part of the record industry are you in? Or what do you do in the music industry? And I'll say, oh, I cut phonograph record masters for vinyl. And they went, what? Like, they still make those? And, there's been a lot of articles about it. The Wall Street Journal, some of the New Yorker, some of the larger publications have done stories about it. But the guy on the street who's not into vinyl oftentimes doesn't know about it. So, yeah, it surprises people when I tell them what I do. Now, the phonograph record's been very good to me.
This video is sponsored by Music Direct. Music Direct is the online retailer for audio aficionados with an amazing selection of records, audio equipment, and vinyl accessories. They have experts available anytime to answer your equipment questions and have an equipment trade-up program because good sound starts at the source. Find all the records and audio equipment you need at musicdirect.com.